Beglétar an denúr dámata sin an núd a glétar ara agus sin mar a bhídar.
There were 10 men hanged. And how many of them are remembered by name?
The term forgotten 10 I don't think should apply to them. They were never forgotten by their families.
I think it's something that should have happened 80 years ago, and I think it's a tragedy that it has taken so long.
We've never really had satisfactory explanations why the remains have not been removed.
Deep down, everybody knew that they couldn't keep them in Mountjoy forever.
It has been a long and, at times, heartbreaking process.
Idir saon lídeag fiche agus meiche fiche héin, le linn cogan na síirse, croch rialtas na Breataine deithnúr óblach I brísún win seo. Corbaí gré na caracrach iad, áite annach siad ceir scór blian dúltaithe ag rialtaí éagsúla an stáid. Ní gan treid a hennig lá úscailte. I mí ar a fóver blian an 2001 dahan an stád an deithnúr dearmata a jeru. Óglaí a fuair bás ar son na poblachta. Kevin Barry, Thomas Whelan, Patrick Maher, Patrick Doyle, Bernard Ryan, Thomas Bryan, Frank Flood, Thomas Traynor, Edmund Foley, agus Patrick Maher. Téin scéal an deithnúra agus an fachtas a thug sláán ón brísúnéad siar ceir scór blian. Bunaíocht dáléireann I mí anor 1990. Dír siad ar thíre an dón mhór dáléireann a aithins mar rialtas tleathach na hÉireann. Idir 1990 agus mí júl 1921, chearú cogan na síirse idir an Taire agus fórsaí imperiúlachta na Breataine. Chuir rialtas na Breataine trúpaí paramíleata go héireann, chun an lábhan óachtar a áilt ar thranglam agus mí áward na tíre. Na dúchrónaí ar dús agus an sin na auxiliaries. Hannig an Restoration of Order Act I bhaim mílúnasa 1950, an tacht fin ar chuireú breis agus scór séranach faoi chuairt an Breatainach. Déirú deithnúr díosan, an deithnúr dearmata chun báis.
Crug Court Armor an deithnúr tuisc go raibh na Sasnig ag caile an cácht agus an smacht na bhíocha ar an tír. Bud an arm court leis an cód bhíleata is dlí féile a bhain na Saidirí agus barud eisceaptúil ar fad é dhéanamh. Déanamh é leis an Restoration of Order in Ireland Act 1950. Agus thug sé sin cócht dos na Sasnig in Éireann, dailán le Saoránaigh in Éireann, álas na mar rud é gur haidirí an arm hasna a bhí antú. Agus bin an fá gur úsáideach é le piadhre a chuirí bhain ar na hóglaigh, tá sé go dubh spád le sin.
Cé gur tríal chuairt arm a chuirhar an deithnúr, ní uair siad bás aidiúra, ach crochúiad cosúil le corpaí chománta. Tar éis na crochtaí dír gaoltaí na marmh ar gorpaní ar ais ó údaráis na Breataine. Ach corú na corpáin I gré frísún. Dúra leis na gaoltaí nach fétaí gaolúd an éiritas, faoi míle sé an tacht an fianó spáis. Gaoltaí nach fétaí gaolúd an éiritas, faoi míle sé an tacht an fianó spáis.
On the morning of the execution, my grandmother stood outside the gates of Mountjoy and demanded his body and to be released, and the authorities wouldn't consider that.
I believe the family were so shocked at the idea of not being able to obtain his body for burial that I don't think they really knew where to turn to. And as a result, had to virtually give up hope, which was, I find, a terrible punishment in itself.
Ideally, the family would have liked him to have a proper funeral and him to come home and that was his wishes that he would come home, but as it turned out, he didn't come home for a very long time.
Nuair a dheis haring rialtas na Breataine mí anar 1922, lean iad sín at lán faoin rialtas nua, taisí déanana an óglach áilte rais. Thocraí mí hála Coileán gur ceart dí eileachú a dhéanú ar chorpán an óglach a curú leistite frísún nó barachaí mílite. Faríar bris cogan na garad amach agus curú na cinú ar ceall. Tar éis cogan na garad bhí deilt harad sa tír. Bhí amach chun pulatiúla a smacht. Bhásaí rialtas nua an téirstáid 67 fearr le linn cogan na garad. I 1924 dí eileachú ceathar I Mountjoy agus a curú las muitin brísún iad. Níor ceadíoch áfach dí eileachú na bhéir a chur údaráis na Breataine chun báis.
We've never really had satisfactory explanations for why the remains have not been removed. Whether it had anything to do with the political climate of the time or not, I don't know, but I see no reason why any delay can be justified, to be honest with you.
Bé seasamh rialtas an téirstáid ná gur siad curthaí ró ada, agus nach bheith bhí toirt faoi dí eileachú. Ciléir survé a genú I 1925, dúrú gur curthaíodh an deithnúr I gúnraí gan chaideán, I gré leoch hrúm. Níor scéal dóchas a ché. I 1926, bunaíoch eagraíocht Ionach cumann únaí na leachra Gael an NGA agus thóg siad sin láiseach I gás an deithnúra.
The first memorial to the Forgotten Ten was a memorial erected by the National Graves, 1934. The purpose of the National Graves was to ensure that the memories of men and women who worked extremely hard for Ireland, who risked death, who suffered death, are kept alive for the benefit of the Irish people. We didn't like the idea of 10 people who made the supreme sacrifice for Ireland to lie in prison soil.
Harna bliantaí, príal Germany éagsúla ar únaí an óglach, an NGA, Cormádaí an deithnúra, Shannon do réal ré, Cardi agus Gaeltaí. A feadh blianta fada, heach líon mór scoláirí a choláiste na hallscoile blá clia ar mórtheolach an na húna, comórú bliantúil Kevin Barry. In aineoin sin I lig, chuinní rialta sí leanónacha orthú, bliana ní bliana ag dúil tú taisí déanana an óglach dá Gaeltaí. In 1961, ag searamnas don na Gaeltaí, nacht an túchtarán éimean de baléire, deara nua ar óna an óglach. Ana nítear a láindíobh leis ar leachtaní éagsúla ar fud na tíre. I 1965, Jerry le fachtas eile an NGA, taisí Rory de Gasman a ahiúchú ó rialtas na Breataine. Oscailú an díosbaireacht faoi uaí an deithnúra, ach ba leor tógáil na cruise seo do rialtas na hÉireann is cosúil. Le himimecht aimsire ba léir go raibh ag tip ar a bhaachtas. Dearán na Gaeltaí ar éon ocail faoi dí eileachú, chail go leor acu dóchas.
I found the attitude of successive governments difficult to understand. Things were left sitting quietly, and if you leave things sitting quietly for a long time, people forget.
Each of these 10 men have their own story. Each of them are equal in what they have done, in what they believed in, and are each deserving of the same amount of recognition and honour and respect.
Ar an géad lá saoin 1925, an chroch a bhí an do scolar a leish, 18 an chéad duine den deithnúr agus an té a bóige leis. Primus inter pares, Martin clú Kevin Barry fós. Rugú is ráis na tinine im lá clia 1922, an tríú páiste a seachtar. Búchtal an é be háthar Tom, a fuair bás gan nach 6 bliana Kevin, agus thóg Mary Barry na páiste bóige leihí ar eistan bearn dúchais ceatharlach. Tás Kevin a níos Erim I Dom Bay, go mór faoi anáil poblachtach Cathy an drifur sinne. Im ná clí rís den níos a chuig déag is óglach é Kevin le complach sí an chéad chachlan. Seall I scalannaí I chuinil an gúr mhóthar thuaidh áte bhfuil sé le na bhún chara Frank Flood. Glachan gur teacu páirt in achtarí milita le chéile. Bhí an chrochan an de Frank chomaich. Drastal Kevin ar choláiste Belvedere, scolára comasach a dimmer ománaíocht agus rugby. Bhí even behan scolára leish, the UCD.
He was a very light-hearted person. Now, there's a letter that we have here. They went on a drinking spree, 5 or 6 of them, to Glendalough. But in the letter he said on his way home from Hackstown to Town Bay here that he fell off 3 or 4 times on the bicycle. And the end of the letter was, damn drink anyway.
There's one new letter that I found in which he declares himself having been blotto for a week. That's not bad going.
I gan cúpla bliain óglach crochanta bheith Kevin. Míon bheitheh níideag fiche, chéin buíon óglach Barry agus Flood in the Mask ag sealgaracht arm sa King's Inns in Lá Clia. Í armáil siad buíon mór saidiúr agus scuil siad síriad. Ar maidin an fiche lá bhí an fómhar níideag fiche, bhí Kevin in animas a bheith ag attógáil scrúdú leish, bádó sin dó. Ag lacu páirt a bhí sé, I líochán ar bhain saidiúí ag bácús monks, idir sráid na haglaise agus sráid an rí thuaidh.
There were 8 soldiers altogether, but one of them realised that he wasn't being covered by anybody, and he fired a shot in the air, and that started the whole thing first. Kevin's gun jammed several times, but he was able to get a shot in with the 4th round, and he hit somebody. Then his gun jammed again, and he dived in under the lorry. But some woman saw him, and she thought the lorry was going to drive over him, so she called as a man under the lorry.
Gá agus tóga go dtí an North Dublin Union áte cheistíú Kevin go trom. I ráitis faoi bhóid ribachreachta, dúirt sé gur tugadh droch ide dó, agus gur cadú faoi bhagairt a bhá sé sa Union. Muna sceitheh sé animacha a chumrádaithe. Ar an bhíseú láide bhí ar a fómhar, tógu Barry go dtí an chóirtearm, an chéad cheandá lehéid ag Barrick Marlborough. Cadú dúnmharú an Private Whitehead in a le. Saidiú na poblachta, ní raithin Barry an chóirt, agus haring a attorney Seán O'Huaigh siar an chás.
Kevin was sitting very casually in the chair with his legs out, and he got an evening paper from the evening before, and he started to read it. And he was asked various questions which arose from the statements of the various witnesses. And he said, I told you, I do not recognise the court.
Bhí is go maithaige céir de bhí an ná dó. Gabhagé ar an láthair le gona in a lámh, agus fiú mar ar scuil sé an ochar é féin. Bhí sé cinnteach agus an pinás a ghearfaí ar ná Peadbreath an bháis rud a dénach.
Rinú iirechtaí ag an nebilis airde halas ó bus, fuisih óhás áilt de Barry tuis go óige. Níor a ghéal an General Macready. Fleanáil mí hala chuileán táirthail ach níor a rileis. Scríomh Kevin a litir dhearannach dá chara Kathleen.
Dear Kathleen, I have just received your letter and thank you for it from my heart. I believe the usual thing done in my case is to make a speech from the dock or something, but I couldn't be serious long enough to do it. Besides, anyone who ever knew me would never believe I wrote it. Now I'll shut up. I wish you every success in love and business. Give my adieu to Des and your mother, and say a little prayer when I cash in. Your pal, Kevin. Yes, Kay. As you remark, we have seen some good times, but not as...
And my father, Michael. And it was a very touching scene, in that they said their farewells and he stood to attention and saluted them as they left. So that was the memory they had of him when they were going out. He seemed perfectly calm and showed no fear of dying. He was proud to die for his country.
Why they chose the 1st of November for the hanging, I don't know. People came up to Mountjoy, they were free from work because it was the All Saints' Day, and there were something like 5,000 outside the prison praying for him. Kevin believed firmly that the country should be independent of Britain, and eventually he proved it by giving his life for that belief. Colin spent the night weeping and vowing that there would be no more lonely scaffolds, that Kevin's would be the last.
Níor Colínú Galwins I Chuileán. Níor bé croch weagnach Kevin Barry an bosú Jerry. Tá stiad a cúig bhí Patrick Maher agus Thomas Whelan I Marithe ónach na falla. An téann lá fichiad saon níag fiche an í armaidin warí gunadóí Mícheál Chuileán dar déag de rún seirbhís na Breataine ag láthar éagsúla fug na chaiteach. Hid Birch Auxiliary san actriad céanlaí. Buile marfach de gréasán fasneise na Breataine. An tróna sin, bhris bhuiin dúchrónach isteach a chluife idir Bláithlia agus Tibredáin I Bácha Crócaí. Scuil siad gunnaí, fág ó 4 marú.
Just at the match at Sard, British soldiers came in through the gate down by the railway end. 10 or 20 minutes later, the Black and Tans arrived down and they came in by the Royal Canal end. And as they arrived at the Royal Canal end, for some reason or other, they saw the firing in on the crowd. The firing was all over in about 4 to 5 minutes.
Go garid in gau Thomas Whelan, fair óg ganach an dábhlín ficheige.
Thomas Whelan was born in Gortramach. It's about 2 miles from Clifton on the Skye Road. He had 9 brothers and 3 sisters. He was about middle way in the family, I think. He was a good-looking fella, and happy-go-lucky and jolly, and a good singer.
Fair cráfach, hí Thomas Faffy ag an sagart áitiúil an Monsignor McAlpine. Chláir sé le cumann sin féin sa ghlocháin agus é 18 díos. Go garid in sin, thug sé air Bláithlia. Thug sé lóistín sa rín, agus níor bada gur raibh postaige is stáisiún trénach Broadstone.
After the shooting of the special agents on Sunday morning, the British were going to make sure that somebody was going to pay for that, you know, so he was just one of the unlucky ones. He was picked up on his way home from Mass some days after Bloody Sunday, and there was a general roundup by British forces. He spent 10 days in Ballykinner and then he was moved to Kilmainham. He spent most of his time in jail in Kilmainham.
I Gilwainan, hart faoin am seo, bhí Paddy Morden ag fannacht a rial freisin. Gábhlín tríochaige. Tóg é gur sin á chun de Roscamán, duine as chlán éonar déag. I 19 thú sé go Bláithlia agus deibrí I teach tábhairne Doyles a bheanna bliantaí.
Is dótha gur raibh sé san IRB go lua nuair a bhuaigh sé go Ballaclia. Bhí sé le Thomas MacDonagh agus Sean McBride I Monarch and Jacob, 1960. Curú a prison é lena lán daoine eile sa Breataine an sin agus curú an fáilte river nuair a tháinig sé arás.
Ní fada Dan Paddy gur sin á, dil sé ar Bláithlia agus síl gníomhach an óglaí. Sorry wad ba captain é, an rang aran bairde den jetnor.
Bhí sé an gnóthach go háirithe leis an lucht ibre agus bhí sé ina ball den cart common grocers and vintners agus nuair a cuireadh chun bás é, bhí sé in ógtarán ar an grúpa sin. Púpla lá ina dhíth dánach na fola Galway agus tóg go Arbor Hill é.
I grúch an Arbor, thar Paddy dearú neamh ciontachta amach faoi cheilt ar a bhóna léine san íochán. Of course I can prove I was miles away, but let them see their folly out. Bhí conspóide baint leis an mealacha aithníoch Morden agus Whelan. Tógan na fíniche, saidirí in alam na Breataine, timpean na brísún éagsúla, ina rálíonn mór fearr le chéirí I de líg faoi áras gur a bainteacu leis an lúiseacht. Is a réigean a bheitha ag súla tarú carram. Tar éis an aitheantais, tógú Moran go dtí Kilmainham.
Bhí sé neamh ceantach agus ceap sé nach méid siad den an é ar Cynneán agus go méid sé amach a rís ag an nolig ach ní mar sin a hála.
Le scéal go bhála, hanig Maher Whelan teprití go Bláithlia. Ní rill sí bhaile gur crochú amach.
She made a huge impression on everyone apparently by her courage. She was really like a character out of John Millington Synge with her Connemara shawl, and that side of nationalist Dublin, Maud Gonne and company sort of wrapped themselves around her in a way.
An siúláide ag fiabhra bhí éilú beartaithe ag Paddy Morgan, Arnon O'Malley agus Frank Teeling, fear cinnteach as achtaíocht bhónach na falla. An géadíireacht bhain siad mioncheata amach, heb na nearthóráfach agus chúlaí siad chun tríleirí a bhainse san iad ar gion. Tá legan éagsúil ar an go déirigh an scéal. Dan Morgan an dar íche agus Jimmy Simon o Dunnile. Bart as ar íoch Morgan go díor.
Cur Pádraig Maher an curm ceol beag ar bon conas go méid seansig an trúr eile éilú.
Ar an géad lá fiabhra, bhí Thomas ar ghuineadin cheatar a thuiseoch in núnharú an Captain Bagley ag sráid bhágóid íochtrach. Bé Michael Noyek, Júdach, a turné bhí hílí chuileán an fear a chus an chuileán. Sular thosaí an thuairtearm go dú pápirí na trílach ó ifigí Noyek ag fórsaí na corónach. Rinne bara na héireann gearán tréan, ar tugó éon flústáibh. Hasí an thuairtearm in hallan na chaiteach, síomh nuad á le héid.
Ceannas na rudaí a bhí mí hasúil faoi cás Thomas Whelan ná an tificach a bhí ag tuair féinis an raig agus an pein féinis a bhí in an raig. Bhí eisintréis féinis a thuirt i gás James Boyce agus bhí sé mí ceart faoi sin agus a ghlach le na féinise sa cás seo.
Ar inise an iné sin a bháin déirú Whelan chun báis. Bhóid sé gur ar afran a bhí sé an maidin sin le cúlach na rinne. Dá bhéidí mar fecha dúnharú ba bheasa dó féin ar fadéid ar leis, dí a úsáid mar cí chasanta. Ba óglach é Thomas ach seans nar lach sé arm riamh. Ring fear cílín leis i gluch an arbar. Deir sisin gur a leisgear Whelan óglach ceart a thuirtear hain, níor scuil sé ar a chu riamh. Ach bhí seans an isán agus a bhálach a bhás hain ar an groch óglach ilte don gogaíocht. Fear I déalaach a bhí an a heaslin ónáis.
There was definitely a sense in that generation that what they were fighting for was a social revolution. I think that was intimately bound up with the dream of the Republic.
An átaréis an éilú I Gilwainán, ní nach inú droch atmosfér nar a thosaí tríd ar an Morgan I hallan na caiteach. Corúna le dúnharú an Lieutenant Ames, gníomhar a speisialta ag sráide bhóta dónach na falla.
An maidin sin hui sé ar afran ag a thugta clog I carrig dubh. Cos cáilín grágáil a bhí aige státha agus hiúil siad ó bhaile le chéile. Hui sé chun an céad tram áil go dtí an chathair agus hui sé go dtí an fine grocers an vintners an iníir sin agus bhí ní duine déag a crothaí an talabhaid sin.
Bhí fiad éithe aige a rá nach rá sé san áit sin ag an am sin. Iarbhil de arm hasta agus báil den cumann Júdach in éireann agus rudí mar sin. Agus cé fá go dúchas na daoine seo go léir chun a rá go bhacha siad an fear seo. Ar na cúdsí sin bhí an slíon ar ránaí ag mór agus an slíon ar chuig an cás as cór na córta níra sé sása.
Bhí seasa bheith Pádraig Maher an is dó mar go rá sé an uachtarán ar an Garad Goman agus chuir siad telegram ag Lord George ach ní an sé an Jefffield.
Everyone who met Uncle Tommy during that period was deeply impressed by his sense of chivalry, I suppose. That impression was such that the man who guarded him, the auxiliary, everyone who met Uncle Tommy during that period was deeply impressed by his sense of chivalry, I suppose. That impression was such that the man who guarded him, the auxiliary, Lester Collins, converted to Catholicism.
I seachtain a chrochta thug Lester Collins busca seachláidí do Whelan. Thug sé na millseán de lisí a man iníon óg bhean a lóistín. Tá sír faoi ar faoise bheith díosach siad le chéile iad, ach do groch faoi dí héana bháin a bheadh siad. Ní oscail siad iad na seachláidí, tá siad le feiceáil fós I bríosún Kilwainán. Ar an téan lá fichiad anar ní déag fiche hín, gáil ceatar as blá clia, Patrick Doyle, Bernard Ryan, Thomas Bryan agus Frank Flood, treis líochán ar orsaí na chorónach. Bhí na hóglaí an gróthach ag tús mianar. Ge raibh lá an gan líochán éigean sa gahar. Ag híndig an maidin chinúnach sin, ionsaíoch feiceil de chuid an RIC le búmaí láda garladar hid an tulca ar bhóthart an conrach. Heb plán ar an ionsaí. Níor gortaíoch aine dórsaí na chorónach. Hennig aithneartú auxiliaries go tuban ar láthar a chacha. Thug sí tóis, scuil na hóglaí chun iad héana chusins, hit óglach amháin. Gáir an cúig go réile le gunaí nó armlán in na seileadh. Caitheú bríos an cilhhain an iad. Bé Patrick Doyle an duine be hinne siomh, ní mlína sfiche ige.
Patrick was a carpenter. He was a founder member of the Amalgamated Society of Cabinet Makers and Joiners. He married my grandmother Louisa in 1916. She was originally from Glasgow. He was away to his bitter disappointment. He wasn't here for the 1916 rising. And when they got married, they lived here in 1 St Mary's Place in Dublin. My mother was born in 1917. He was a flying column the night she was born, and he just stopped in to say she was to be called after the Countess. So she was called Catherine Constance, known as Catherine Italian. In 1919, he was involved in a raid in Collinstown Barracks to get arms for the IRA. His brother Sean was one of Michael Collins' 12 Apostles. He was with the intelligence branch of the IRA. Apparently they were like chalk and cheese. Sean, naturally, I suppose, the nature of his work, would say nothing, never tell anybody anything. And deeply religious man, more serious than Patrick. Patrick had great sense of humour and lovely voice, I believe, lovely singing voice. Liked parties, liked life.
Blackleat Bernard Vine, Rugage Malefib, agus for share Codedicus Skull Gabriel, a Cowper Street Edushka na Casa. Val an Dahula Bound, Vialan Kalini in a whore, agus Viana Groget and Gaelge. Juan nor Hogache, Dutchiga, Fadashin or Hedgedin Flash, Gumadishe and Changa, Gavaishi and Fanyo. When she along come out to see him a bloody Sunday, nor a quick na Tanza stop. A table mother shin, lad on a cuna by.
But in a shave, Suoikach, Kroga, Ideliach, a Bernard, but Tragoid, Ufasakain, or Kurkumbas, or Tragoid and Clown, Beshin, and then the Killavarigat and Clown.
Jég ahar Bernard nuair a bhí sé óg. Bhí cónaíar in ardán na canálach riaga le na bháthir, a bhirt scrifúr agus a grár altram Paddy O'Sullivan.
Tréis dó an scoile ágáil fuair sé post sa sáitiar bhís, ach ag an am sin bhí orthú píos pop ar a híú nach mbeadh aon bhainte le Sinn Féin ach dúiltigh Bernard é sinna dhéanamh agus fuair sé job eile hí sa leabhar na cathrach.
Well, I can own Shin Vialan lad Zoga, Gref Sim Moricus and Noshuntus, August Wodegan a Yenam than cheer, Ach hastig wig dullistach some movement mar a derpa, August nur a Krisha Shakari na Hogley, Visha Enet Company than IRA, 1st Battalion, August a Saturn Wode, near Chapshe Gomach Sail a Kashes na Hogley Gameshik Hogarshin.
Rugú Frank Flood is ráid imid, sa mní níide agus a hían. Trastal sé ar scoilní a chuinil, de Kevin Barry, agus bhí sé páirteachs na rúthirí King's Inns agus ráid na hagla sé freisin. So le crochú Kevin, dúirt sé go asúlaige go meach síl fada ráthú le Frank. Ní rá, ná buí leid.
Frank was a studious type. He wasn't one that was out for wine, women and song. He wanted to be an engineer. Both sport and study were his main occupation, as was the fight for Irish freedom.
I think his father, with 8 sons and 1 daughter, he really had to make them toe the line, if you will. But Frank was beyond all of the others his favorite person, probably because he looked like he was going to take life seriously, and he was going to make sure that he got a very good education.
Maclean iniltóireachta scoileacht bheith Frank nuair a gáha. Bhain sé scrúdaithe na céad agus an dara bliain le gradam. Lieutenant ag complecht heit brugáid á Lia. Duine de chláán mór poblachtánaach seachas an taithir, Pauline Dílis de chuid an DMP. Ba bheag nar a chail siad drár eile ar an groch, an bhíon céanaí. Gá Tom ag glosciú teacha chuistim mí beltainna. Bhí cuairteadam le choréisin go maiith, ach sábhála.
There were 5 brothers involved in the active service unit of the IRA. Frank was just one of 5. He, I would say, got involved because his eldest brother, Sean, and another brother had joined the volunteers in 1913 in the Rotunda when it was formed, and Sean had fought in the Four Courts garrison in the 1916 rising. It was from there on that the other brothers did get involved with the active service unit of the IRA.
Rugú Thomas Bryan in 1897, agus dá san níos ag ceathairdeag sráid Henrietta den na hismóirí agus a bhirt drifúir.
Tommy, he was very extrovert. He was very good at cracking jokes. He always had a good sense of humour. He was married in November 1920 to a girl called Annie Glynn. 4 months after they were married, he was executed.
Trastal Tommy scoil na Mráithí Christi is ráid Brunswick Hui. Fair Ibre bheith James. Óglach gníomhach bheith Tommy, a hui staig ocris gúlan Thomas Áis, 1970. Báil in gáda onóra ag socraid Áis. Ní nach ina go raibh aithne ag bórsaí na coronachid.
And Tommy was on the run. When I think he used to hide out around Rathfarnham area. And my mother, it was her job, she used to have to go out with the meals to feed them. But they had quite a lot of visits from the British. They'd storm in and they'd turn up the furniture. He was cycling through town one time and he had some guns on him. Being quartermaster sergeant, he used to have to look after the guns. There was a raid and he had to abandon his bicycle and jump over the wall. That time the name of the shop would have been stamped on the bicycle and the number of the bike. The auxiliaries commandeered the bicycle and took it away. First thing the next morning they were waiting for the shopkeeper to open. They were going to trace it, but seemingly the shop had been broken into during the night and the only thing taken was the records of the bike.
Nuair gáiad ag drom chunrach, tógu Doyle, Ryan, Flood agus Bryan go Kilwainon. Áitir á Patrick Maher agus Thomas Whelan ag fanat hana. Dan an Cheshire i Kilwainon sa Murderers Gallery go dtí an tailú I lármí fiabhra ar a eistriúiad go Mountjoy. Thosaí an tríal ar an dara lá fichead fiabhra. Tuisnar Mariach aine ní bheith breth bháis iarúnacht an ansaí. Cúiseach iad áfach I bhearú cogaí an aon rí agus an áir trés. Cúisní rápínos an bháis ag dul leo.
Tá cás ar cethir drom conrach a spéisiúil mar tugtar léirgus réasúiltama ar céirdaí an smaoinemh a bhí ar siúil ag an am agus an dailt staróil idir an dáthír ag dul thar naiscotí ach na dréis 35 agus ach páinins le é a thuirtaí bhaim. An ach cuimire a rinne an ácáid brethúrdais ag deire an trílach, der sé trúrdais ag deire an trílach, der sé treason is an offence committed against the duty of allegiance, and a breach of that duty by a natural-born subject of the Crown renders the offender liable to be proceeded against for high treason. Agus the bíd seo na natural-born subjects a bhí ag fearra coga an waithí drom conrach ag gcuine fórsaí an corónach. Gach airnach ar bhealach nar aontaigh leis na Sasnig nó a bhí I gcuine rial hasna nairn bhí siad cinnteach I dréis.
The natural charge in this case would be for being in possession of arms without being under proper military control. Hundreds of people have been tried on that charge in this country under the newly passed Arms Act. But apparently it occurred to some of the brightest stars in the constellation of the government that the penalty under the Arms Act was not sufficient. And it occurred to them that some way of imposing capital punishment on a charge of this kind must be found. Accordingly, you have this charge of high treason brought in, a charge out of all context. I suggest to this court that such a procedure is both an abuse of the law and of this court.
Déirú an ceathar chun báis, gan mulla trócaire. Fuair an cúigiú óglach, Diarmaid O'Sullivan, faoisibh, chuisne rá ach an 7:10 I Mountjoy, dan an teisir jarabú brethe bháis. Bhí spin maitharú. Scríb Patrick Doyle neart litreacha da ben chéala, Louisa, agus Louisa Minic aon trí bliana díis, Kathleen.
He adored Kathleen and her childish prattle and her long golden hair and how much he would miss her and how hard it would be for her, and he always referred to her as my poor Kathleen in the letters. He welcomed visits very much. His mother, of course, went to see him, and stepfather Barney. He gave Barney all his tools because Barney was a carpenter as well. Apparently that's very significant when one tradesperson gives another their tools.
I have quite a lot of letters that Frank wrote, including one that he wrote to my father. He said he'd pray for both his comrades and his enemies when he goes to heaven. The one sorrow he had was to quit so early in the fight. He had looked forward to the victory parade through Dublin and often thought of how he would swagger in that victory parade. Alfie Flood, who was his youngest brother, used to bring the hot breakfast up to Mountjoy each morning, and it was he was told on the Thursday morning before, no more hot breakfast, your brother's for execution.
Tommy, I know he was heartbroken because I had seen a letter he had written to his father-in-law. Says, how am I going to break the news to my darling wife? He was very upset over her reaction to the death sentence. As regards to any visit in jail, I just don't know. I'd say he would hardly have went to his death without saying goodbye to her personally.
Caiiciis ribh bhás, rugil cúpla ag ben chéala Patrick Doyle, agus go dtí seo, ní raibh sin an cuairt a thuirtear.
My dear Louisa, this is the last letter I will ever write to you, as I'm to be hanged on Monday. We only got our death sentence at 5 o'clock this evening. Dear Louisa, pray for your poor Pat. I want no crying or wailing of any sort. Be cheerful. Give my love to Kathleen and the other 2 babies that I've never seen. God bless you and protect you. Your loving husband, Pat.
Jeadú, tháinig Patrick, Louisa agus na linmh gá lá ribh bhás. Ar a meallach bháile áfach, fuair duine den cúpla bás. Ar an lún, chal Louisa Doyle a fearr, agus chuir sí lenmh. Chal siad macín Hannah, rint mí ribh sin, agus war ófaí Seán drár Pat dá chréachtaí, ag lisciú teach a choistim. Scríomh Patrick Morgan agus Thomas Whelan a litreacha dearnacha a bhaile.
My dear parents, I suppose ere this letter reaches you, you will have heard all the news there is to hear about me, and I pray God to give you the grace to view my fight with death and my triumph over it with equanimity. I was told today by way of a birthday gift that myself and another prisoner named Thomas Whelan are to go the same road as Kevin Barry went not long ago, on next Monday morning. I did my best as a dutiful son and brother. Don't worry for me. Pray for me instead and shed no tears. And always hold your heads high, because I die a martyr, not a criminal, as they would paint me. With best love, your fond son.
My dear mother, just a line to let you know that I'm still the same as you saw me today. I was never afraid to die for a good cause. Do you think a mother like you would rear a son afraid to die? You are the bravest woman I ever saw. I'm proud of you. I hope everyone gets a happy death as I'm getting. They'll find me in the morning, game to the last. I hope all at home take it well too. Goodbye now, Mother. From your loving son, Tommy. Forever.
Imagine an ceathrú láidéag Márta 1921, bhailí na slúte don mású bhú is dar Mountjoy. Crochfaí I béire iad, drim ar grim. Seol faoi mórdan agus huilean dús ag a séach log. Ag 23 lé an Canonach Waters an tafran sa Hillindóf. Rug huilean barog charadis a Gard Auxiliary agus ar mórdan. Ag a 7 bhí Shell Doyle agus Ryan as complocht F tucaí. Hit siad beirt ar scafal na cruthe tar éis freastal lena chéalaí ar Afrin. Chudal Thomas Bryan agus Frank Flood chosúnach sin go raibhar na Gardaí iad a úscailt. Dag siad sláán ag a chéalaí ag a 8 chlog ar a doscail orlár na cruthe fufu. Titim 8 treich jet náirlach a bhí ag Bryan, 7 treich 1 orlach ag Flood. Ag 23 oslíoch gata an frísún agus fáistú fógra ar an doras a dúirt gur coriú pínfre an lí I grích ar an séisiir. Stróiciú an doras é láiseach ag duine an súa.
The Irish Congress of Trade Unions called a general strike for that morning. No buses or trams ran in Dublin before 11 o'clock, and in fact there were 20,000 people praying in the rain outside Mountjoy jail. There was that type of protest at the time.
Like most parents, the father and mother were heartbroken over it. It was not a trauma for the family. Annie had been pregnant, and through the trauma of the trial and the death, she lost the baby. She miscarried the baby.
Cuir a bhás is deach go han mór ar Maher. Dír féidir leis cant faoi gan Jóra síle. Cuir sé is deach go mór ar a saolar fad.
As sin amach den bhí Maher Bernard ina downta hain. Bhí sé sin bhónach, tis nar a bhéine eile sa clán na bhí a gummer.
All of the brothers emigrated after that, only my father stayed at home. There was a sense of disintegration almost, and I always felt that it was connected with his talent, his idealism, like to see it struck down at that time. It was devastating.
Bhí díaltas ón dá híomh tar éis na grochtaí. I géadú garda chruise ná, warí na hóglaí Bert's fólín. Bhí tribláid freisin sa blochan.
There was 2 RIC men shot dead at E.J. King's corner, as they call it. The next day the Black and Tans came into town and burned and looted the town, and there was a couple of people killed. The Black and Tans came up to the old cottage, but they only found the old people inside and a couple of young kids. So I know they shot a few geese around the place.
Mas rud é go raibh na Sasnig ag súil go gurfaí deire leis an fachtas leis an cogad bhí ar siúil, bhí donna mórthú a bhallart ar fad a tharla. Cheas na hóglaigh an fád agus an slí in ar ghlach siad leis an pianós é górach a gearra gortham. Thug sé go mórí bhain ar an phobal. Heasta ggóithú go seasadh siad go huimhreach as córam taobh rud a rinne siad agus leis sin de bhí bua morálteachta acu.
Ar hálan na grochtaí is omí túram faoi chorthamíocht na bhreatan I néireann na nochtach. Hannig litiriche chomhróin isteach go teomh. An os in ceann seo hí Louisa Doyle, wife of a man who was executed, Dublin, Ireland. Hannig siad ó I bhhadas I géin, ó ghoine éonar agus ó aigrechtaí ar fud na héireann leis. Sheol Maher Kevin Barry Sra telegram ag Gaeilge an Cheshire leis an teachtracht dúlánach seo. Sympathy and congratulations. Trónóna lácrochta an Cheshire, gá Thomas Traynor, níomlína tríochaige, an chéba hinne den deithnóir. Bas an tolach chun de ceatharlacht a Traynor. Hannig sé go blart lia go hóg, Háte bhúil sé le na bhain chéalaí Elizabeth. Ba gréasí é Thomas le siopa I Merchant's Arch.
He was very committed, I believe, too, because it's been said that the principles, by which he lived were God first, Ireland second, family third.
He was a great father. He was into his children in a big way, and they thought the world of him. And unfortunately, from the time he was executed, they really missed him, and they had a hard time coming to terms with, what happened to him.
Ba óglach gníomhach é Thomas an óige. Bhí sé Molins Mills le devaléire in éirí amach na cásca. Curú prísún Samratan ach scuileadh sire an bhíon dar gcionn. Ní raibh Thomas chomh gníomhach as sin amach. Bhí cuaram deithnóir cluine
During a skirmish in Dublin, one of the IRA activists was on the run, being chased by the towns in the city. Running past Tom's shop, he threw a gun into him and asked him to hide it. The following evening then was returning it to the IRA headquarters in Brunswick Street. And it was while he was there, the auxiliaries raided the premises, and he was subsequently arrested there and then and taken off to Mountjoy jail.
Tar éis go bhála caiithfeadh go donna le Traynor sa Gúisleán bhí an aigógaing. Cuireadh dúnmhar a bhaine le ag eascar as an líochán. Phléadála abhcóide nóil an Whelan gur príosúnach cogaithe.
The alternative defense I was putting up was that it was a conflict between the forces of the British Army and the forces of the Irish Republican Army. The accused then is a prisoner of war, and as such a charge of murder does not lie against him.
This man was a member of a rebel gang, a civilian in plain clothes who could be turned in one moment from that civilian status to a most dangerous member of society whom it is the duty of the Crown Forces to contend with and put down.
Díreú Traynor chun báis. Níor moladh trócaire dó, cé go raibh sé bean agus deithnóir páiste na dhíth. Cúige lá fiche d'Aibreán, seoladh Traynor chun na síríochta.
'Twas early one Monday morn, as the small birds sang in the flush of dawn. On a Monday morning on the gallows high, brave Thomas Traynor was led forth to die. Somebody came out and pinned a notice in the prison gates to say that Thomas Traynor had been executed at 8 o'clock that morning. Everybody turned to their rosary and, prayed for him.
Tar éis tríal Traynor, thóg an taire Gíal, an cígar a dúchaí Gilbert Pwarí an taire an Pólín. Caiiciis ní sin, fuair ben patar procáiste sa bust, den na gcomhléidí persanta agus a litir dhearannach hickey. Thar ceann bhean Traynor, dír Michael Noig go scaoilfí a chortach lán, dúiltaíocht dó. Cuireadh gré na caracrach tíomh leis an teisiarelli.
To have been left like that, with a family of 10 children must have been so impossible at the time. It's hard to understand. It had a very bad effect on the children themselves. Some of them became quite bitter, and as soon as they were able to, they left Ireland altogether.
To have somebody taken from you and not being given access to their grave, that was very hard to take. And I'm sure it did have a terrible effect on the family.
Rin Traynor Killeen le Sean McCone, Aradri agus Kirtz le bheith. Dinigin dram a ríorthú tá sí déanana Traynor. Dinigin dram a dúiltaí. An 7 láide bhí an bheitheh ní ag fiche héin, curú beirt as chun bhí limlí chun báis, dá báirt I bhúscailt óglaí as tréin ag stáisiún Chorclinge, agus ar a bhealach go príosún Corcaigh.
From out a guarded carriage amid panic-stricken throng, John Hogan, he was rescued at the station of Knocklong.
Gá Sean Hogan seachnaí na déag sa gantar cúpla lá ribh. Dinigin cheatar a ghlach páirt in achtraí solachód beag a chuir tús le cogan na saoirse. Cin Dan Breen agus Seán Tracy go scaoilfí ó Hogan ag stáisiún Croclinge an trío láidéag bealtainna, nídéag. Hanig chuigar óglach ó chachlan an ailtí an cawri a lotha, Edmund Foley in a mask. Ar rhaisins táisiún croclange don tréin, bhí hógan á ghardal ag Cashar Pólín. Ris grusla amach idir óglaí agus Pólíní. Mariach an constable Inright agus an ládar Gion. Ní rá sé an, ach thug sé ráite stóvar ball. Sin bhfuileis Jeff Britchie ar a chuméid. Ras don trí léig in alwaile do Foley, mac fedimóra, ceir blion fiche aige, ar a gáú agus nuair a cúiseach é.
He was the first to join the volunteers around Galbally. He was a lookout man on the rescue of Knocklong. He was tall, good-looking, great personality, and an eye for the women.
Edmund Foley was my godfather, and the rescue in Knocklong took place on the 13th of May, and I was born on the 24th of May 1919. And I had to be taken through the fields to be baptised because Ned Foley was on the run. He came back in September. He was found at home and he was arrested. In fact, my husband could remember the black and tan surrounding the house.
Tógu Foley mar aon le firáitiúla eile go príosún nimlí, Patrick Maher in a mask. Bas glán leara a fedi in uchaí criclinge é tríochar bliain díos nar a gáha. Bhí cónaí ar lena bháthar agus a leascháin trár agus trifúr. Ní rah óglach rógníomhach é, cé gur báil den chumplacht áitiúla bhí an.
At the time of the rescue, he was working in Knocklong. He was working as a clerk in the egg depot in Knocklong. It's mainly checking eggs and poultry and putting them on trains. Paddy was a very quiet, unassuming man. He had a great love for his family, for his mother especially, and for the part of the country he was from, and for his country itself.
He wasn't next nor near the place when that particular thing happened. Although he worked in Knocklong that day, but he was gone home. He was going home at 6 o'clock from Knocklong, and he called into the local pub up the road called Muddle's Pub.
He went to work the next day, and for a few months everything went on then as normal for him. In September 1919 there was a raid in the area. Patrick Maher was one of the people captured in the raid, and he was taken to Limerick Barracks.
War cuimhne a rár Tom Quindon ar an oíche a gáú Paddy.
So Paddy Maher the lot to him. He was playing cards with both the masters. He was a terrible man for cards. So it was after 12 o'clock and he came down. This happened, this is no fable at all. But this old woman, they used to have black clothes on. She appeared alongside him and she walked alongside him the whole way till she came to the ditch going out into his own house. And he went down the room to his mother and he said, "Mother, there are some terrible troubles to see in front of me here. You're not at all if you go away to bed to see, you'll be all right." So he went in bed 20 minutes when the whole house was surrounded with the tons, and he was taken and he was never seen after that.
Chaith Foley agus Maher beag nach gá bliain í bríosún. Tríálach faoi ghóiad I limnach, beasíontí na dúréna. Dinú iirechtaí eile mé feriste agus hardwacha. Fuiarú aisteach an bheirt go blá lia. Bhí an Restoration of Order Act in isi bhaim, agus socraíoch go gurfaí Foley agus Maher faoi thuairtarm. Ní a bhéin chumpóir dómh gur a 8 eile crochtaí faoi nacht céanaí.
They tried them by court.
Especially his mother and sister, concerning him because he was an innocent man, as he always stated.
The family were very traumatized. It had a terrible effect on them all their life. His younger brother, Willie, never, ever spoke about him. He never mentioned his name. The only time I heard him mention his name was 2 days before he died. He was calling him Ned. My grandfather campaigned for his release until the day he died. So he went to his grave a very disappointed man.
Hannig afhiochan achtas ach gháil na gorp sna 8 déanacha. Thóg bheirt bhean an NGA, Tesní Chearnaí agus Catlín de Fuite, cás an deitnar a thug féin, le flosc.
Tess Carney became secretary of the National Graves Association. One of our great ambitions was to apply to the government departments to get the bodies of the forgotten 10 exhumed and brought out of prison.
Chaith Tess a dúthracht leis a bhachtas, I sríomh hiag na rán aga éagsúil a rialtais agus ag idirgheartaíocht le gaoltaí na nóglach. I 1994, bhí cead scríofa tucaid an dlí eilechú ag gaoltaí níonóir fearr. Lean Tess éirí a chur brú ar an rialtas. Dúiltíochaí gan Aontas na Dlána Lig. Ag a buinte seo, níor heastaí ó chlána bháin, gaolta an Captain Patrick Maher, dlí eilechú a dhéanamh ar a chorp.
Bhí drifórpáí go mór an bio agus ní rá fan orthaí chuir isteach ar an áit ina bhí sé le 8 bliain in nuas. Bhí fatí sarthaí freisin nach méic siad an an a hantas crin a thabhairt ar a gcarp.
Ní imnig an húise. An rins lí agus cheart, mí bealtainna 1994. The 10 were interred in a common grave, and there is absolutely no certainty that all or any of the remains could be accurately located or identified. Bhí léirscáil an a heaspáin de uaí, ach ní raibh muoín iomlán as a crinneas. I 1995, thóg an NGA leacht chuimhneachán don deithnúir ag I gceapach ar eile glasníon, ag súil go deochach na corpaní féin sáir I bhád. I 1998, chuir tlánaí mhór an tús le lé idir I théin agus an rins lí agus cirt. Genú dul chun cín. Bunaíoch cuiste ad hoc le ionadaí an tíisi agus ionadaithe an rins lí agus cirt, an NGA, an Ancient Order of Hibernians I Marston agus cuid go na gaoltaí. Bhí na tlána go léir ar bord faoin bhliain an 2000. Bhí lá an achtais ag tíocht.
We are here today to commemorate the period 1918 to 1921. Among the young Irishmen who fought for our freedom in that period were a small group, 10 in
Céad lá saona bliain an 2000, ag searamnas I deach na cruiche Mountjoy, dógur John O'Donoghue an tar dlí agus cirt rún an dí eilechú. Tháinig an chuiste ad hoc ar thóaontú faoi láthair na eilechú agus deascráthaí an tearamanis. Táirgiú socrid stáit ar na tlána, blach siad go fonmhór leis. Tarú iontach dó siúd a bhí ag feachtasaíocht le fada. Farír bhí sé róháil an a lán. Fuair Tess Carney bás rins míon I ribhe gan tarú chu deibre éiciall, agus bhí for mhór mór de gaoltaí na céad blúine ar lína fírinne chomáid.
We're glad that it's happening now. We're sad that it didn't happen for 80 years. And I can't even tell you how sad I am that my grandfather isn't here now.
A lot of Thomas's children, they're not here to witness his coming out. So we're here in their place, and I think it's a tragedy that it has taken so long. I think if other governments had taken a little more time and consideration, it might have happened.
Previous governments never done nothing in the White Athlete world, only this is the government that really put this in the headlines.
Lá bealtainna bliain an 2001, tagan na gaoltaí le chéalaí ag ceapach Mountjoy don uair dhearnach. Tháinig siad freisin teach na cruiche, an áit sin na bhór na hóglaí bás, ceir a scór bliain roimh sin.
When we were brought into the hanghouse to see the scaffolding, it was very, very emotional. I don't think the group of us that were there, I don't think anyone spoke.
It brought to me what I felt like as you mounted the steps. I wouldn't go in again, put it that way.
Bhí mé ag smaoinú ar cad a bhí siad san ag smaoinú agus dótha gur tharla sé go tapaí.
You can almost feel the ghosts of the men who went through the place. To be standing there where Tom Traynor once stood, it's very heavy. Very heavy.
Today we're closing a very sad chapter in our history as we symbolically seal that consent to the exhumation of the volunteers.
Níos déanaar an lá sin, chuaigh na gaoltaí go riona tíisi, áit ar thug siad a gcéad scuafa firamáta don dí eilechú. Ar an 8 lá fichiid de bhí an beitheamh, bliain an 2001, tug an banisteoir na caiiseach ceadúnas dí eilechú de cheanara na seirbhísí príosún. Mílúnasa tosín an obair faoi chóram an Dr. John Harbison,
They may lie deeper.
They may lie deeper.
Yeah. And did they find much water?
The ground is quite damp.
I think we should not go into this exhumation with too much hope. It's a great idea, honour our War of Independence dead, but they were treated as criminals in the burial process, and if it was quicklime, we may not get their remains. At worst, we will find nothing. Soil. I think at best we will get skeletons, but sadly 80 years have elapsed, 81 years, and it remains to be seen if we have any material to work with.
All families are delighted to have the bodies out of Mountjoy, released from jail after 80 years, to be buried in consecrated ground.
I didn't ever think it would come to this in all my wildest dreams.
My mother, she had this anniversary in the paper every year for 66 years. And if she had lived to see this day, she would have been elevated.
It's an opportunity again to celebrate our history. We are what we were and what these men bought for us, and we should never forget that.
The actual plans of the burial site was handed over by the British to the Irish in 1922, and they were so accurate that when they went to exhume them, they could identify immediately which one was which.
There were all sorts of stories over the years that they were thrown into a grave, quicklime thrown in top of them, but that never happened, and it was a wonderful thing to find that they were buried with dignity.
Rowney Nínor Clan Glasníon, agus muintir Patrick Maher baile Nundry. Bhí tromlaí fada na Gaeltaí gealla a heart.
I know any time that I visited the graves in Mountjoy, we'd have to call the governor, we'd have to identify ourselves, we'd have to present ourselves, and we'd have to be marched in to the graveside.
The graves were, really well maintained, but you always, look back and say, why is he here? Why did it happen? The graves were, really well maintained, but you always, look back and say, why is he here? Why did it happen?
We saw the ultimate object of his release as one whereby the family would eventually and at last have access to the grave, to be able to visit it on his anniversary, to be able to bring our children up to it. And I think including him in the plot in Glasnevin does mean that his name will be remembered.
We decided on Glasnevin. I hope he'll be happy there with the rest of his comrades.
Ní rá cinú an rialtais go dúrfaí sochraid stáit don na hóglaí síró chunspáid. Bhíad an a bhí dú na chuine, dína dhéile in Avras go man fí les pulatú les.
Cuireann sé dín báram dur a léim na pápéirí agus tá scríóirí sa pápéirí ag léig terrorist na hóglaigh for Boston Tíirse.
Some of the commentators have been actually offensive, and to draw any parallels between what these men did and the current sort of political climate is completely irrelevant.
They were fighting under the auspices of a Dáil that was democratically elected by the people of that country. They were freedom fighters, yes, but not terrorists.
These men gave their lives for a cause that they believed in passionately. My grandfather never wanted to be a martyr. He would far have preferred being alive with his young wife and his daughter whom he adored and his baby.
Baimid an Doyle agus lán sásta go bhfuil sé ag fáil aithins an méid a rinne sé san Tíirse. Ó Doyle am go maid Jorán, clán Jorach sinna, by Jorán.
Sochraid stáit na nóglach an cheafú lá déag dhearú fómhar, bliain an 2001.
Mountjoy was the most touching part of the whole procedure. It will bring tears to stone, that's all I'd say about it now.
Bhí Jorán ar maidin aránig mé anseo
bhí mé an brónach ach an bródúil.
Actually leaving Mountjoy, was walking behind the hearses because that felt like we had achieved something. Finally, the men were free. That was very special.
I was particularly overwhelmed by the public response. So many people gave their time, and very moving to see them lining up, especially outside the prison and on the route. It was tremendous.
Tásta go mó clán hóglaigid féin bhí as an down ar súd, tuisc go raibh sé go millite agus ócádan anna bhór de gach éine.
I feel the day sort of answered all the criticism and all the questions. I saw Fintan O'Toole there today. He called a lot of this grotesque, and I wanted to go to him and say, well, I'm Philomena Whelan from Clifton, and I'm attending the funeral of my uncle in respect of my father. And I'd like to say to him, I found his presence there grotesque, and I'd like to ask him to go home.
That was my favourite part in the cemetery. And I could get the full military honours. It was sad that they couldn't have had it 80 years ago. They were just buried as criminals, but now they've been buried as martyrs.
Vamos!
Run, wings of the heron. Tommy Traynor had shown you, the no most some Deathner ugly, for a boss there and gruff. You did it for office in Kearshaw, not Jacqueline or Mahan or that. Go Willie or turn a far shot and shot on you. I was a Mickey again.
Each and every one of them were honoured today by the people of Ireland, and I thought that was very, very fitting tribute to them.
It's probably without question the best day of our lives. You know, it's something that will never happen before. It'll never happen again.
Dula bhaile nach tá anna áthas orm go raibh an lá chumór agus go deas agus tá anna hástanis.
Saturn an fiúláid a bhí ar a fóbhar, chuirtar Patrick Maher I Maileán Lundri, de laigh faoi hún ina bhuaí féin.
My dad would be very proud for this occasion. If he was alive, the Lord have mercy on his soul. That's what he really wanted. His remains brought back to Ballylanders, and we're stone delighted at this particular time.
It was such an emotional day, an overwhelming day. I felt like all of us had done the right thing and bring the men home. And if you see the countryside around here and the setting where he'll lie forever, it makes me feel glad that we did it.
The choice is ours. We can go whenever we like now. We don't have to get anybody's permission.
There's a dear little isle in the western ocean, an island of purity, holy and grand. Its name fills its daughters and sons with emotion, when hard on the shores of the far off distant land. Oh, 'tis Ireland, God bless her, the birthplace of heroes, a home of the patriot warriors and sage, our bards and our chieftains, whose names live in stone.